Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a bunch of tournament results over the past weekend. We have some interesting ones for the premium format as well. Japan held their WGP, I think solos event for the premium format. So we're going to go through all of the decks towards the end of the video. And yeah, just cover all the results with the DBT 13 meta and just kind of how that unfolds. If you guys haven't already, click the subscribe button, get all the notifications of all the videos coming up, the tournament analysis, all the results, and pretty much deck profiles. Click that subscribe button to get the latest on this channel. If you guys need any coaching, feel free to hit me up on my Metafy. My link is in the bottom right hand corner and in the descriptions. Feel free to book a session and we can get started for your BCS Worlds invite. So looking at the WGP Season 4 in Jakarta, so that happened over the weekend. So this introduces a lot of the DBT 13 meta, obviously with, Jujul, Leonorn and all that stuff. But, Leonorn and Youthberg do not exist on this pie chart at all. But we definitely see a huge proportion of them being Mygos, which is the Bang Dream collab 6th ban, I think it was 6th or 7th ban or whatever it is, the movie ban. And Mygo seems to be like one of those decks that we did not anticipate at all being, one of these really top contender decks. We all thought it was going to be Youthberg, Leonorn, but a lot of people are, suddenly picking up Mygo, and it is showing incredible results. 2 Jujul as well, and 1 Minerva, Mushiking, and Gandiva from the previous meta. Still very strong decks into the current metagame. Then looking at who essentially came first or fourth. So first was Mygo, and then second was Minerva, third was Mushiking, and fourth was Gandiva. So a spread of everything. No Jujul on the top 4, which is a little bit sad for me. I really love the new Jujul Ignis and really love to see the results from it. But congratulations to all these players. I think these guys qualify for the Nationals coming up later on in the year. So congratulations to all the players here. Then we also had the WGP Season 3 in Shanghai. So here we see a lot more Jujul. So 3 Jujul and then 1 of everything else. So Leonorn, as we expect. Minerva, still a good deck from the previous format. Youthberg, again, a new deck that came from set 13. And then Mikazuki, one of the strongest collab decks coming from Token Rambu. And then Bastion Accord as well. Then the top 4 first was taken by Leonorn, and this seems to be like a recurring trend. So I think one of the previous WGPs, Leonorn was distributed at like 1 within the top 8 and then ended up taking the whole tournament. So here again, a 1 of in the top 8 distribution and taking the whole tournament. Second and third were both Jujul Ignis. Very cool to see. This is what I love to see. Definitely a deck that I'm very excited to play, very excited to test, and just kind of seeing how the deck kind of evolves. The playstyle with original Jujul, go into Jujul Mass, and then obviously into Ignis, which is grade 4 with triple drive. Yeah, the deck really changes in terms of its dynamics. So very cool to see that, these two are there and there are results to kind of back it up. Deck lists are there to, I guess, copy for the interim, make your own changes, start testing and have a bit of fun with it. And then fourth was Minerva, as we expect, a very, very strong deck. And this is actually a pretty good indication that Minerva might actually be a very, very good pick for the BCS season. Obviously we have the release of set 12, which is, coming up this weekend, I think. So, going into the BCS seasons later on, I think there's still like an ample 50% left. So if you're playing the standard format, Minerva actually might be a very, very good contender if it's battling against, Jujul Ignis and Leonorn and still doing well. So yeah, that's just some indication for you guys. And now we get into the spicy stuff. So this is the Deluxe Cup held in Tokyo. So they had a top 16 deck breakdown, and I think Fuzzy did a really good job to kind of show what the premium format really is like in this pie chart, right? So a lot of one-offs. The only duplicate is Narukami at 3 distribution, and we have, the likes of Nectar, Kagero. Pretty much you can list majority of the 24 clans in existence on this pie chart, which is pretty crazy. And it just shows that there's a lot of development in the premium format at the moment, and there's not really a best deck, so to say. There might be a deck that really gets you up there in the top 8 much more consistently than others, but sometimes a topping deck is not a winning deck. And what I mean by that is you might be playing like a very ultra consistent Narukami deck, but there might be a deck out there that counters Narukami and, you know, takes advantages of, I guess, Narukami's weakness, or, you know, takes advantage of, you know, abusing what Narukami is weak against. And yeah, you know, you might just see Narukami fall off. You might make top 8, but you might not win the whole event. And then just looking at the top 4, like I said, you know, Neo Nectar won the whole event. And Neo Nectar is actually a really good matchup into Eradicators. So we'll explore all the decks in the top 16. I think there are some pretty interesting lists. So we're going to go through all of them, don't you worry. So first place was Neo Nectar, second was DOTX. Man, a very Vanguard centric deck. I think there were iterations of running the Damage Exploder, and then, you know, going to Rebirth, copying Rebirth on your first grade 3 right, and then Slam and Jam, heal back a bunch, and then essentially sit on 0 damage. Third was Angel Feather Gize. As we expect, it's probably like the most, how should I say, common version of Angel Feather at the moment, only because Angel Feather doesn't really have a lot of, you know, other things going for it. Would really love to see, you know, more Angel Feather related stuff so that it kind of, you know, goes away from Gize. And then fourth was Negro Bolt. Definitely a Grand Blue deck that we did not expect to see. We're very, you know, used to seeing like Night Rose, Beatrice, but Negro Bolt, that is quite interesting. All right, so we're just going to go through essentially the deck list, so all of them kind of one by one, just kind of seeing how the decks kind of progress. And then, you know, how each player has developed the decks. And I think there are some pretty interesting ones I kind of want to highlight as well, obviously covering the Negro Bolt as well. All right, so starting with the first deck to cover, and this is the Mega Colony list that obviously made the top 16. So focusing on the Darkface engine. So it's an easy search. You don't need to worry about, you know, locking out columns because Ghidorah does that for you, right? Pretty jealous that Japan have the Sweet Cocktail in the alternate art. Very, very jealous. But in terms of the engine, it uses the Machining Mantis to find the threes. You know, you're pitching your threes when you're, you know, striding up. This essentially calls out and becomes free attackers essentially. And then you're running this guy to essentially restand when you're attacking with Ghidorah. Playing the one-of card from set 13, which is essentially a stride fodder, so to say. You discard it for stride, you draw 1, and it's recurable, which is very, very strong. So probably one of the best grade 3s to come out of that set of, you know, the Cycler card kind of deal. Very, very strong card for Stoicheia in general. And then, you know, everything else is kind of like the package for Mega Colony. You know, you're running High Class Moth to countercharge. You're still running your Brilliant Blisters. You know, you can just shut down Regards using this. He's playing a 2-2 split because I'm guessing they're, you know, anticipating to see a lot of restanding decks, more countercharges in the Commander Officer Lady, and then the one of Honolulu. One Forbidor to, I guess, find some of your threes maybe, but otherwise, yeah, that's pretty much how the deck rolls. Yeah, the G-Zone isn't really too fancy, pretty much what we're accustomed to see from Mega Colony, always spamming the Ghidorah stride, which is probably the strongest stride Mega Colony has in its arsenal. So yeah, that's pretty much how the deck kind of works. Choke your opponent, and yeah, if you're versing superior core decks, then see you later. That's pretty much how it works. Then looking at the winning list for the tournament, which is Neo Nectar. So this Neo Nectar list ran the Asha engine, and then obviously having Inez as, I guess, somewhat of a defensive stride. I mean, defensive grade 3. So essentially when you're going first, you really want to find your Asha, right? So you're playing, you know, your pad minis, trying to find your Asha, ride up, get to force using the History Collection stride. You don't really care too much about the on stride, but the 2 force really helps. Then you're riding into Inez, and then Inez's secondary skill is if you superior call, it gains 5k, right? So what that means is that you can combo into your G-Guard. So the Rain Breath Dragon essentially calls, you know, a Sylvia and a Noama to, you know, generate tokens on the board, and then essentially it gives your Vanguard plus 10k, right? You know, you're running the green Katrina, green Katrina or the Katrina, right? The grade 1 promo Katrina to generate tokens, more tokens with this, and then you have your attack extender in the Horticulture Elf. I always forget that name. And then, you know, you still have more token generators using the Lily Musketeer. I think that's a Lily Musketeer. Yeah, but it essentially place on rearguard, create a token, and then you stack 2 tokens to return it to hand. So ways to essentially farm your board back to hand and then not have to worry about it. Playing 4 Honolys to essentially slow down all those multi-attacking decks. But I guess one thing to note is that Honoly is somewhat counterproductive if the numbers are low enough for Inez to kind of bump up her own power. But then again, you know, in terms of the G zone, you're only running 1 Rain Breath, which is probably one of your best defensive G guards, especially if you're combining it with Inez. But then again, you know, if you're always stuck on Asha, then it doesn't really matter. But yeah, very, very cool deck. You know, Green Katrina is still one of your best strides. You're flipping Cyclone, all your tokens hit for monster numbers. And yeah, that's just how it is, you know? And funnily enough, you can actually go into this stride and then, like, instead of using that, if you ever need to, but I don't see why you would ever need to go into that stride. Especially because your opponent needs to be on grade 3 anyways. But yeah, Chaos 1, sack 2 tokens, stride this, 10k 1 crit, something like that. But otherwise, you know, you're still running one of the Premium Collection stride, very strong for multi-attack extenders. But pretty much you're bashing with tokens, and that's just how the deck works, right? So very cool to see Neo Nectar get a win for this event. The next deck is the Angel Feather Gize. So you're running Gavriel Engine. This one is actually running the History Collection Gavriel, or the G Gavriel, and then essentially getting into this stride, getting 2 protects, and yeah, that's pretty much it. You're playing obviously all Zeroth that aren't Ultima, so that you can fit in your Overtrigger, and then everything else is kind of like draws. Pretty interesting to see that this person is running the crit, but I guess in terms of shield value, it's much better. And it acts essentially like a defensive draw. You're attacking for under anyways, you don't get additional power, so you're just popping the crits on like a Honoly or something, or whatever else is on the board, if you know, ever intend to give 1 damage. But otherwise, you know, this one's pretty interesting. You know, you're using the grade 3 to discard and draw, high shield power, that's about it. But everything else is like, you know, you Hamiel calls this calls the grade 2, and each of them do rescue checks. And then Hineo, you still have, you know, the promo from ages ago. If you guard with a Cannon +1, Soul +1, rescue check. This also rescue checks on your turn as well. And pretty much you're hitting triggers all the way up till you get to Gize. And that's pretty much it. And otherwise, that's pretty much it, kind of how this deck works. It hasn't really changed, just some more tools in the deck from what Angel Feather Gize was before. So yeah, cool deck. And then now we have Melista. So this is a deck that a lot of people are fearing at the moment. It can essentially loop you out of the game once it gets to grade 3, and there is nothing you can do about it. Though, there is a lot of things that can go wrong with this deck, especially because the deck runs very low counts of grade 1, grade 2s, only running 4 grade 3s, and then running a bunch of bricks, which is grade 0s. If you ever see any of your zeros, so you know you're running 12 different zeros, which is a lot, you know, and then you're also running 1 of the grade 1 gem, you're running 3 Mid-Tower, 4 Ural, and you just, if you G-assist and fail, it feels so bad, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if you're riding into your heal for your grade 3, you're not looping because you're not on Melista, and it just feels bad as well. So as much as you know how degenerate this deck actually is, it has a lot of weaknesses in itself, and that's why it's running a bunch of draws. And if your opponent, you know, G-assists and doesn't hit defensive draws. They're ditching 2, and you know, the pieces just fall apart. And if you have no hand, how are you gonna guard Eradicators with like, you know, 5 or 6, you know, attacks or whatever, 7 attacks if they have Chos and stuff? Like, how are you guarding that, right? So yeah, be aware that this deck isn't too crazy. Yes, it is degenerate. Yes, it does need to be removed from the game. But yes, don't always think that this deck is auto win to the Mista play. It's just not possible. And yeah, the G-Zone is just there to look nice. Cool. And then this is the second place, the X deck. So again, like I said, it runs the 1 Rebirth. This one doesn't run damage exploders. So just, you know, straight up DOTX, you run the Lizard Soldier Conroe, find your 3, correct ride, go up, go into Dote, and then just smash your opponent's face in. That's pretty much how the deck works. Not maxing on crits, so playing 8 crit, 3 draws, and yeah, 1 DPG, because the DPG is free because you're counting your hand at 0 with DOTX. And everything else is kind of like draw, retire, farm, and yeah, that's pretty much how the deck works. And then your strides are like dungeon. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, I think, whoa, it's like 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 G guards, 7 G guards, 11 G guards. This guy doesn't care. Yeah, pretty interesting, to say the least. So yeah, that's the DOTX that came second. Now we have a Nubatama list. So I think a few decks have kind of been lingering here and there. This one focuses more on the V Shiranui, which is something that we don't really see very often with Nubatama in general. Usually it's all, you know, related to, you know, the G Shiranui to dominate and then mix it with Mizukaze. Using the forward ult to get the Mizukazes, playing the 1 Void Master to bounce rear guards. Everything else is just, you know, help you to get there. Ungai is used to reduce your opponent's power to 11, so you know, if they hit defensive OT, well then too bad. You drop Ungai and call it a day, right? And this deck actually doesn't attack a lot, so playing the Honolly makes sense, especially against, you know, high Excel decks that attack ridiculous numbers. You know, you just remove Honolly and you don't really get affected too much. In terms of the strides, you know, you're still running your History Collection stride if you ever ride into Oboro, and then everything else is just kind of there. Rine is probably the most important, but this deck doesn't run Mugen Lord, which essentially dominates your opponent's whole field, but I guess the perception would be, you know, the field isn't there to begin with. So yeah, this is pretty much how the Nubatama deck works. This guy is busted, you call this out, you Soul Blaster 3, and yeah, your opponent just cries without G guards, essentially. So yeah, that's Nubatama in a nutshell. Then this is Vanquisher. So Vanquisher had full Bronto ban, and this is, I guess, an adaptation on, I guess, how it kind of works now. Pretty weird. You obviously, you know, you run the Vanquisher 3 so that you can go into Zoras to generate 2 excels, and then, you know, you have chain attacks with Mighty Bolt with Chatura, and then on top of, I guess, Exterminate, going to Voltage later on into the game. But yeah, it's a bit weird because like the power level doesn't sustain as you chain attack because Exterminate gives it to the units that are currently on the board. At least that's how I know it does. Yeah, so it gives it to the current units. So yeah, I'm actually not too sure how this deck kind of works, but I guess it's a good innovation given that full Bronto is banned. So yeah, that's Vanquisher in Premium. You know, you still have your Esperadia to restand. Everything else kind of goes into Soul. You can chain attack with the Rising Phoenix, and Chain Bolt, and Chatura, and only running 1 Choa because I guess you don't really have the space. And then running this guy, I think it's like place on Vanguard, Rearguard. Oh no, sorry. An act on Vanguard or Rearguard, counter 1, Soul +1, bind something, draw 1 or something like that. yeah, quite an interesting card. If it's on the Vanguard circle, you draw 1 or something like that. Spot retires, pretty interesting. So yeah, that's Vanquisher, and then DP is DP, one-shot decks, and this is pretty much a list that we've seen very often. Playing the 1 Taser Lage for superior core decks, otherwise you're pretty much Daizoras, 5 drives, 6 drives, 8 drives, a million drives, and one-shotting with the Unibird. Unibird in conjunction with Linkar, and pretty much punch through anything, right? And then you're playing the Laurel, double power, quadruple power, whatever, 8 power, octuple power or whatever, and then you just slap. And then this deck runs the Zeal engine to essentially, you know, rest minus power, but I think it's more so, you know, if you rest 2, neg 5, and then you draw 1, so you actually get a little bit more from the early game, and then you get into Zeal. Zeal is essentially free advantage, right? Play some Vanguard Rigger, top deck, you call it. Yep. And yeah, you know, Dalana is still very good. Then this is the Negro Bolt list. So this Negro Bolt list is a little bit different to what we kind of see. I guess one good thing about Negro Bolt is that it's anti-Narukami, because I think it removes all your bind to the drop zone or something like that. And yeah, that's just kind of how it is. But then you're running 3 Bell. But then in the same token, what you could do is let Narukami bind you, and then you drop the Bell, just drop everything, and then you suddenly have like big power. I'm actually unsure how this deck kind of works. You run the VPR as like a multi-attack extender. You know, when you're striding, you create the Usurp Dragons to come back out. But otherwise, everything is just kind of standard Grand Blue. Quite an interesting list. Plays 3 Navigator. I guess maybe the idea of this deck is to turbo into Bartolomeo, and that's pretty much how you win the game. But otherwise, everything else kind of seems a bit weird. You don't even play the Night Rose for the History Collection Stride. So I guess if you like, yeah, I really don't understand. It's a weird list, I gotta say. Very, very weird list. But yeah, coming forth, big respect. I mean, if you guys can figure it out, yeah, let me know down in the comments down below. And then Spike Brothers. So this one is quite interesting. So you're running 3V, 1G Nova, and then you're playing 4 of the Strider grade 3 that came out in set 13. 4 linebackers, 4 Braki for early game aggression. You're playing the VPR for consistency. Everything else, Ambush Dexter. This is not running the Greed Online, so you know, you're getting up to grade 3 and you're not copying this. So I'm actually not sure what you're copying. You're just riding up to grade 3 and that's it. Feels kind of weak. But I guess maybe then your Acrobat Verdi into the G Nova going first, and then, you know, get 2 Excels right into V, and then start, you know, gallying them, I guess. Still playing the Mecha Instructor to kind of bind and call rear guards. You can usually bind and call the Ambush Dexter for multi-attacks. So yeah, maybe that's kind of how the deck works. Pretty interesting. And then Raging Form. Wow, man, I haven't seen this deck in ages. And playing even the Phantom Abyss, RPBA and RPBD. Yeah, so this is a blast from the past. Definitely didn't expect this at all. You're riding into Raging Form, going into Chain Rancor for the Guard Restrict. The Guard Restrict only works technically on the first attack because, you know, the Guard restriction, I think your back row has to be all grade 1s or something. You're using this grade 1 to fish for your Raging Forms, Rhino for Raging Forms, and then your Blessed Angel, when it retires, kind of +1, call a grade 1 from deck. So pretty much you just keep recurring rear guards to essentially sack and re-ride. And then this grade 3, I always forget the name, but essentially it ride fixes you, so you re-ride into Raging Form, you add it to hand. And yeah, that's just pretty much how it kind of works, I guess. And then obviously you still run Raging Wrapped. Raging Wrap is like Raging Form Light, where you can discard an Abyss Dragon and then restand for neg 1 drive, but everything else is kind of normal for Shadows. Yeah, actually this is probably one of the iterations of Shadows where we don't see Luard and you know, much more Vanguard centric. Probably, you know, a good call for this meta as well. So, you know, if you have your Raging Form deck, here you go. Build your Raging Form deck in Premium. Then this is another list. This is more the traditional Eradicator list that we're used to seeing. You know, you have Sweep Command, Vanquisher as your backup grade 3. You know, if you're going first, right into Vanquisher, Zoros, create 2 Excels. Everything else just kind of plays itself. For Demolition Dragon for early game aggression, for easy pluses. Put it behind your Vanguard and your opponent's not guarding. Spark Raise as well. Put a Demolition at the back as a draw 2 on grade 2 if your opponent lets it hit. Forward all to call the Esperadia, and 3 Honolys. You know, guy doesn't care. Playing 3 Cholos, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything else, you stride, exterminate, call it a day. That's pretty much it. Running the one Gilgal for any tricky matchups like Riviere, just kill their Freya, and yeah, that's pretty much how Eradicator rolls. Then the next one is Chaos. So this one is a different take on Chaos from what we expect to see. Still running the V Chaos with Chaos Breaker Close to lock one of your opponent's hand onto the board. Photon to essentially free lock something else. Zirconium still one of the best Starvader cards printed in existence. And then you're playing 2 of the Starvader PG for draws when you know, have certain amount of locks. You're still playing Carbon to search your grade 1. So if you ever need, you know, your tail guy or any of your other ones, I guess, then you can kind of search it out. But otherwise, yeah, you know, you're going into, you know, Deluge, Chaos Universe to lock one of your front row. And then in the event where your opponent has too many Excel circles, you're going to Barrier and make them cry. Get rid of all the Excels, and that's pretty much it. You still have, you know, your safety nets in Glue Ball. If your opponent gets too crazy, then you can start locking multiple stuff in the front row. But yeah, this deck is a very grindy deck. Just pretty much draw out the game. Your opponent will then have no cards in hand, can't really do anything, and yeah, unlucky. And then we have this Jewel Knight list. So Ashley with Olden. Yeah, this is a weird one. So the new Olden from set 13. I'm actually not sure what it does. Something like Kalas 1, Sobos 1 is if it's on the Vanguard circle, call grade 3, draw 2. So pretty much a Pot of Greed. And then something on attack, Soul Blast 1, something 2, call a Rearguard or something like that. I don't remember. But you're playing the Juna engine, and then you're playing with Ashley. But then you're also going into Crystal Luster as your main stride. So I'm actually really curious on how the deck functions with so many different cards. So I guess maybe what you do is you ride into this primarily, chain attack with Ashley and all of your Jewel Knight stuff. But this, I think, copies your Vanguard's power. Yeah, something like that. But I think you have to have a Jewel Knight Vanguard if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, who knows? Pretty interesting deck, I gotta say. A little mix, different from, you know, your typical Salome with, you know, Crystal Luster, Restand, Call a Bunch, and yeah, cool innovation, gotta say. And then the second last deck, this is again another iteration of Erad's, nothing too special, similar to the other deck. This one runs more crits and plays 3 Anastasia as the PG and a 1 Sanctitude, and a 1 of this Guard Restrict Dragon essentially turns off autos. So yeah, pretty cool. And then the last deck we'll cover is NLK. Let's be real, this deck has not changed. It is as cookie cutter as it gets. It still can win games. It might be the best deck in the room or the worst deck if you get super unlucky. And yeah, the deck is just how it is. You know, NLK, Barrow into 4 facts and handshake your opponent if they cannot guard. So yeah, that's pretty much all of the decks from the Premium Deluxe Cup in Tokyo. Really interesting decks to see, and kind of something that, you know, if you're a new player to Premium, this is where you start, kind of see what decks you like. The format is so open at the moment, and pretty much any deck can, you know, play in the format. And if you're playing for fun, this is probably one of the best opportunities for you to get into Premium. So, you know, feel free to give it a shot. If you guys like this video, pop a like, comment down below what you guys think of everything that we covered over the past weekend. Very interesting to see how, you know, the set 13 meta kind of shapes. We can see Mygo, Leonorn being, you know, the forerunners of this format at the moment. Splash of Youthberg, splash of Jujul here and there. But really want to see what, you know, the standard format kind of evolves into. And obviously the premium format is all free for all at the moment. Again, if you guys haven't, please subscribe and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.